All right. It is January 30th. Welcome to the inaugural CNAB community meeting, public developer meeting. Thank you all for coming today. So this is the first time we've done it, so we don't have a standing format yet. But the current plan is to kind of get an update on where we are on the spec, talk about where we are regarding storing CNAB bundles in OCI registries, and then talk about some of the work that has been going on with TUF and maybe with Toto. And then finally, actually, I'd even rather start with this, the images section on the spec. We merged the change in that Simone did a little while ago. And so that deserves special mention because I think that'll mean refactoring a number of existing charts out there. Chris, actually, do you want to start off by talking about that one? Do you feel comfortable talking about that one?
Should we do quick introductions, given it's the first one? There's obviously some people have been,
some
of us have been chatting about it a bit before, but this has been the first public meeting, I would say, like, especially for people not part of that group, it would be great to say hi. Yeah,
that is a great idea. And the reward for a great idea is you can start.
Hi everyone, I'm Gareth Rushkov. I'm based over in Cambridge. I work for Docker. I'm a product manager across a lot of developer tools. I'm in the context of this. I've been contributing to spec a bit, and also I'm writing a Python client. So I've got PiC CNAB working. Apart from the fact that Matt just merged a bunch of spec changes I need to update. All good. Yeah. Next.
You want to just pick somebody and hand it off, and we'll keep going until everybody's.
Oh, I'll go down the list. Lachlan is.
Hello, I'm Lockie or Lachlan or Hey You. Everything's Symlink to me. I am a PM at Microsoft on Upstream, so I work with Matt and the team to try and make great projects to help developer experience, and CNAB is one of them. So thanks for joining and welcome. I'll pass it to Brian Redmond.
Hey folks, yep. My name is Brian Redmond. I do work for Microsoft. I'm a part of our Azure Global Black Belt team. I primarily help customers adopt open source solutions on our Azure cloud. Also spend a lot of time working with this crew here on things like Brigade and all similar kind of tools. So I will pass it on to Michelle, who's next in my list here.
Hey, I'm Michelle. I'm an engineer on the Azure, what's our new name? Container compute team, mainly on the open source side of things. So I work on things like Helm drafts, and most importantly here, duffel. Adnan.
Hey, I'm Adnan. I'm a software engineer at Nami on our Kubernetes team. I've worked previously with some of you on Helm and some other open source projects. As usual, I don't really do anything, and I just tell Miguel to do stuff. So he's the actual person who's done some work on CNAB, and I'll let him introduce himself now.
Hi, I'm Miguel. I'm actually the one that does the work. That's actually correct. And yes, software engineer here at Nami. I work with Adnan, and I've been playing with CNAB mainly by creating a CNAB bundle. I use WordPress and CloudFormation and all that good stuff. Sylvain.
Hi everyone, I'm Sylvain. I work at Docker Paris. I work with Gareth, Chris, and Simon, and worked on the CNAB integration in Docker app. And Chris, it's your turn.
So I work with Gareth and Sylvain. I also am based in Paris, and we've been working with Matt on the spec for a while. And so the thing we're developing with CNAB is Docker app, which is open source. So you can go and check that out. Oh, I need to choose somebody else. The list is not static, so this is a bit of a tricky thing. I see Augustine.
Hi, I'm the Docker community leader in Bombay, and also the Kubernetes, DSUS, and HashiCorp. Yeah, that's me. Thanks. Now let's see who's next. Who's next? Radu?
Yeah, thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Radu. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft Azure. I'm based in Bucharest, Romania, and I work mainly on duffel. Go Phil.
Hey everybody. Sorry my video's not on. I was walking down the street and thought it'd be too distracting. Work for IBM, architecture strategy around Linux and containers. And until I get the right people in IBM who are more active in content and packaging involved, I offered to cover CNAB, and hopefully we'll see some other IBMers join in the future. And let's see, Carolyn?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Van Slyke. I work on Kubernetes Service Catalog, and now I'm on Matt Butcher's team with everyone else at Microsoft. And I mainly work on Porter with Jeremy. So Jeremy, you can go next.
Hey, I'm Jeremy. Work for Microsoft, obviously, on Matt's team. I also work on Service Catalog and Open Service Broker for Azure. I've been working on CNAB Spec a little bit, and Duffel and Porter with Carolyn. Did we get everybody? Matt Fisher?
Hey, I'm Matt Fisher, Bacon Gobbler on GitHub and all that stuff. I also work on the Microsoft Azure Container Compute team, working with Butcher and all that to do Helm, draft, Duffel stuff. So I'm interested in the repository discussion mostly. But yeah, happy to be here. Is that everyone? Miguel, have you gone already? Okay, I think that's everyone here. So pass back to the other
last
Matt.
chance to unmute if we accidentally skipped you. Yeah, I'm Matt Butcher. I'm the one of the authors of the spec and work with the team that does Duffel and Porter and Helm and Brigade and Draft and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so I think we're good now. Before I say anything else, I'm going to double check with Garrett that he doesn't have other good ideas for things we should do before diving into the agenda.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. All right. So now, Chris, do you mind explaining the update on the images stuff? If not, I can give it a shot.
Yes, so we've been working with a bunch of people at Microsoft and others on proposing how we can store these things in registries to the OCI. We thought that would be a good place to get the registry folks taking a look. I believe we now have something that has been that they've said looks okay. They've basically said you guys can do what you want as long as the OCI spec gives you what you need, and I think we've got to that point. I'll be going to the OCI meeting this evening as well to make sure that is the case. I don't want to misinterpret what they're saying there. So we currently have two proposals: there's CNAB's OCI and ORAS, which is the Microsoft approach. We'll probably need to synchronize on exactly what we choose in terms of going forward, but it sounds like they didn't have anything against either of those approaches. Yeah, that's me. Is that a good summary, Matt?
Yeah. And so we changed the specification for how images are declared inside of the bundle.json file. And that was primarily to make it easier to, at runtime for an invocation image, it makes it easier to swap out where the location of the image registry is. So this is to accommodate cases where you pull out of one registry, push into another registry, and then need to pull and make sure you resolve it. So that change got merged in, and that's part of the larger story for how we're getting all of the Docker, the OCI registry support kind of shaped up before anything gets too far from here.
Yeah, a quick question on that, Matt. Do we want to include the format that we store CNABs on registries as part of the spec? Would that make sense?
So that is a great question, and we've had a couple different suggestions on how to deal with it. One of them, well, the first one was to drop it out because it was in the original spec, but it was also in the original spec in a completely wrong way. You probably remember the stuff we were working on back around KubeCon timeframe. So I dropped out the original version Another proposal was, so one proposal was to just leave it out and leave it to implementers, which is okay if there's nothing specific you have to do for things. But as we start standardizing on these are the MIME types, these are the annotations and things like that, I feel like we probably should take one of the alternate approaches. So approach number 2 would be to just add it into the current spec, and approach number 3 would be to add a CNAB repo spec alongside the CNAB core spec. And I would love to hear people's input about where how componentized we want this spec to be, or whether we really want it to be kind of a one-size-fits-all spec. I read through, I don't know, half a dozen to a dozen RFCs and W3 proposals, and it really seems to be largely the community that determines this, right? Like the XML specs is like, I don't know, they're probably in the 20s or 30s at this point as far as number of specs, but some of the others are just one very big soup to nuts sort of spec. Soup to nuts, that's probably an American colloquialism. Entire, everything is covered in the same spec. Any thoughts on which approach might be good?
I think either including it or having a separate one makes sense. I think it is important, as you said, because if we need to get registries to agree on MIME types and stuff like that, having a place we can point them will be a good thing, TM. Because I feel like if we let contributors do whatever they or package it as they want, it's going to make the registry side of things a lot more complicated.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? Anybody want to volunteer to take a stab at a first, or at a kind of a running draft of this?
I don't have any idea on if I can commit some time to doing a running draft, maybe collaborating with someone else on this for sure. The one thing that I'm interested in seeing is, well, I would definitely love to have some way of being able to document how the community is storing CNABs inside of an OCI registry. I'm not too sure on if we want to standardize just yet, simply saying that we're a specification, because there could be multiple different ways of having a CNAB being used as their runtime, like the self-installer, or being able to be used as a thick bundle versus thin bundle and those kind of things. And we're still working out those scenarios. So I'm wondering if it's more like we should be documenting what's kind of best practices on storing CNABs in an OCI registry without actually saying this is a 1.0 specification. So kind of like a guideline on those things. So then we can allow, I don't know, duffel, Docker app, and all those to kind of experiment with those ideas without being cornered in a specification yet.
Yeah.
The main thing is the runtime specification that we're all really concerned about. The storage is not something that we're too concerned about at this point, and especially as we're still working around those cases. So, and especially since the Helm 3 repository discussion is going on in the meeting at the same time that we're having this meeting, and they're also talking about how we can store Helm 3 charts in the OCI spec. So those discussions are definitely ongoing right now too.
That raises something that I'm not sure that we have conveyed broadly, which is how we're building this spec. So I'll come back to that in a minute. But so do you think, Matt, that there would be value in us keeping a running draft of what we think is going to be the spec and just marking it clearly as work in progress? Not that any of the spec currently is not in work in progress state, but as one of the more volatile areas of the spec?
Yeah, I think having it down and making it such that people can understand how this is being stored in an OCI registry or how they could implement it in a similar fashion. I think that's, as a working draft or a working document, I think that's a fantastic way to go forward.
Yeah, and also I'd be glad to help on that as well.
Okay. All right.
I think given that anyone building clients here is basically implementing that, doing that in the open in one place separate from those tools basically means we'll probably do the same thing, frankly.
Yeah.
Just because it's easier to sort of propose and review than it is to have multiple parallel implementations where you do the same work twice. Yeah. And I think that then, again, at that point, we can say, is this actually part of the spec? And if basically, if you're not doing this, you're not coming in. Or we can say, well, yeah, here is the reference implementation of.
Yeah.
Right. I guess the question comes up is, do we want to do a reference implementation first and have a solid thing there, and then make the document a working document based on that reference implementation for others to complete? Or is it better to have a set of guidelines?
I've got the suspicion that it's all just for the same people to start with, and there won't be many of them. And by the time we actually have that implementation, basically, it will be easier to say, yeah, that's actually that's the way of doing it. And again, that doesn't preclude conversations in the future about there being better ways of doing it or that changing. It just starts that.
Okay. I'm fully in agreement with that.
I think otherwise, I think we end up going yeah, we've come up with a way of doing it, but we're not sure about it, but we're going to do it, which I think is, I think we can I think we're better off saying right, let's come up with a way of doing it and say this is how it works.
Okay.
Unless while doing that, we go actually, there's still a load of questions here, and backing off. But starting with the assumption that we can come up with something that's the best way of doing it. I
think that's the right approach. Coming about with the saying this, hey, that we've tried this, we've experimented with this, it's a working document. We have some open questions here and there. We'd love your input and feedback. So I think that's great. Thanks, Gareth.
That actually comes to a more meta point that actually I commented on one of the issues on the spec today. I think Carolyn and maybe someone else did, Matt, maybe, about the basically versioning the spec and the current status. I think the comment was basically around some of the image changes, maybe, or something else and it was should we rev the version of the spec? And there was a conversation about deprecating bits and pieces. And based on the whole working draft process that's laid down, which I think is pretty sensible, we don't have to do. Obviously, we could choose to do. I think trying to worry too much about multiple versions at this point, I think we're better off just making changes, acknowledging we'll make backwards incompatible changes to the spec, understanding that all of this is moving target, and ultimately that there is a very small number of clients at the moment. And I think that will allow us to get to a stable version that we're basically happy with as quickly as possible. And at that point, you're just slavishly, basically, like the OCI folks now are change is really expensive. I think we need to make change super cheap now. So that, the idea of having that's working draft. Everything in the spec right now is a working draft and could change at any moment.
Right. Which
I think if we broadcast that on these meetings and others, I think then anyone building clients right now is buying into that.
So we're V0 then, as far as Semver is concerned, which means as we bump versions, say V0.1, 0.2, 0.3, we could have large breaking changes, and no one should expect it to be stable until we hit 1.0.
I wouldn't think about this in terms of software and Semver. I would look at the process that's laid down is more of a spec process, and so what we have is a working draft of the version 1. That can change all the time. It's not that is it's not that I wouldn't version the spec at all. It's version 1 working draft.
So the process we're following is the process that the W3 outlines for how they do their specifications. So we're in what they would call pre-WD, pre-working draft. Working draft is when it gets accepted into the OCI. And then there's a working draft up until it hits RC. It can change with some amount of frequency. Once you hit release candidate, then you freeze everything except for clarifications here and there and things like that. And then you go from RC to final. I think final is the name of the last one. But the kind of crazy thing about the way W3 does it is you put the version number on it for the one that you're shooting for. So the first version of the spec is always spec 1.0-WD is for working draft until you're done, and until it hits. And they don't follow the Semver process. They have kind of their own standards methodology. So it's kind of unclear, particularly if you come from backgrounds of working on software where breaking changes are clearly denoted by changes in the version number in the W3 schema of things. The appendix, the title of the draft state is the one that indicates stability. So
if I wanted to submit a PR that just explained what you said, where would I submit that to in our CNAB spec, Rico?
It's actually documented in the CNAB spec in section 800.
Okay, so can I say that that was not easy to find?
Yeah, you can say that because it's not easy to find.
Okay.
You didn't read through all the.
I did read section 800. 800 is declarative images, image sets.
It's 900. It might be 900. It's whatever the very last one is.
All right.
I think one thing there is that I think if there's going to be a mix of people, if you've done spec process stuff before, it's probably like assumed, and I think then not everyone will have done submitting something to the README to actually just clarify that for people who are coming not from a weird world of doing bizarre things with their lives is definitely useful.
So
yeah.
We say that we use semantically versioned, but we also say we use the W3C process. Sounds like we really use the W3C process then.
I think we're probably using the W3 process.
I will submit something that just clarifies that then.
That would be excellent.
Okay, cool. Because I did read that the first time. I didn't just like pull some ver out of some location. Okay, cool. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So I know we're coming up close to the end of time. The end of time. So there are a couple things I want to make sure that get out there today. The first one is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lachie, but I believe that on the OCI agenda for the OCI meeting later today, they are going to discuss the CNAB, the proposal to add CNAB as a candidate for OCI standardization. Is that right, Lachie?
Yeah, that's correct. So there's that, and the other agenda item we asked to add was, could we use the dev at Open Containers mailing list for longer, deeper discussions of the CNAB variety, or could we find another mailing list?
Yeah, that's right. That's another good one because we want to figure out a good place to coordinate. So for those of you who don't know, we are pursuing OCI. OCI is the standards body for CNAB, primarily because they have the standards that we are most indebted to, I think would be the right term. The OCI image format, the OCI registry format for Docker images and registries. So if you have time today, that would be a great one to show up for, just to to listen and to hear what's going on, but also to be able to weigh in if people ask questions about what the value of this thing is or what people are planning on doing with it or things like that.
Yeah, it's worth noting the OCI basically just had elections, so they've got now like a few new steering people, so they can now make those decisions. I think that some of them were like, we don't want to make it as an outgoing like group of people.
Yeah, it's actually a really, really cool time in the life of the OCI standards body this year so far, starting really like December of last year. So yeah, so if you have time, and maybe Lachie or somebody else, if you don't mind dropping in a link in the notes, I can look it up if I can figure out how to get to it in my Windows machine. Of the rest of the stuff, I think we would be okay booting some of the tough and in toto stuff to next week. The short version of that is we're still working with the tough team to figure out if that's the right fit, but it's looking really, really good at this point. If that all goes through, we will take out the old OpenPGP stuff from the standard and replace it with the necessary stuff to point people to using tough, notary, and in toto as the ways of doing signing verification and attestation. The really cool thing about this is it even reduces further the amount of knowledge a developer has to have about signing and what artifacts get signed and anything like that. I did a security model review internally yesterday, and it went really well. So I'm hoping that when we talk to the tough team, they will be excited about it as well. So, and again, I'm happy to disclose all the details to anybody who wants to do an internal security review with their team or anything like that. I think Justin Cormack at Docker is also pretty caught up on what we're planning to do, and so it's on my list of tasks to write down that part of the specification so that we'll have it somewhat formalized. The hope is that once we get this done, once this part of the spec will really solidify, so that we can get that part kind of out of the way. So that's it for that today. We can talk about that more in detail later. Anything else anyone wants to make sure that we bring up today?
Just that the agenda said it's an hour, this meeting, but I guess we can do half an hour.
Hey, is it an hour?
It says 9 to 10 Pacific, but...
Lockie, keeper of the agenda and schedule, do we have a half hour or an hour?
The meeting.
I had blanked out an hour, but if you want to keep it to half an hour for now, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, we don't have to fill the time unless we've got something. But if we have got things as well, then we should bring them up.
Well, okay. Well, in that case, let's see. Are there other open things that people would like to discuss today? Anything about the spec?
I just wanted to confirm one thing, which was the previous discussion we were having about the versioning and the working document stuff. So on the pull request that Butcher that you had made previously, which was adding aliases to names for the specification, do we want to cut out those aliases and instead just move the fields over to the new name and just remove the old fields and the aliases? Was that the agreement or the action item that we were taking from that previous discussion?
I think the answer is yes. I don't think we even discussed it explicitly in that context, but I think the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
Because I think it's redundant at this point.
Okay.
So one thing that I think will be useful next, like obviously the spec will move a bunch now. That's good, and I think we should be like happy about that. Obviously, that is going to break up examples, and we want to. I don't think we want to gate changes on the spec on the examples, but we probably want visibility of examples that need updating. So, assuming that the spec will keep changing and updating the examples, like in the next few weeks at least, is probably a fool's errand. But after that, might not be. It's probably worth like writing something. From a validation point of view, even if it's pretty hacky, like we've got the schema, and actually simply having something that runs as a test job on the bundles repo that validates each of the bundles against the schema. We know that'll fail, and we'll keep changing the schema, and we know that'll keep failing. But at some point, we can then go through, and we've got the machinery for someone to just go through and just like it becomes a mechanical task.
Yeah,
it might be worth someone just writing that validation like for the bundles repo and adding it into whatever CI system that we happen to want to use. We could do it as a GitHub action if people want to be cool.
Vaughn on my team, who couldn't make it to this meeting this morning, he had started that as his winter break project. So I should go find out if he.
Brilliant.
Yeah, because we had talked about it. As soon as we had the schema for these things, programmatically checking them seems like it should be a matter of course at that point. Yeah. So that's a great idea. I'll follow up on that.
At this point, we have at least a PR for doing end-to-end testing for installing CNAB bundles for all the bundle repo.
Oh yeah.
I think as well, like if like as things ramp up, fixing the examples, but also like contributing a new example is probably a great sort of like if someone starts playing with the specs, playing in the tools, like contributing another example is sort of interesting. If there is a mechanism for those to be verified automatically, then it's super easy to merge those. If it's easy to merge, then they get merged fast. If you get your PRs merged fast, you tend to come back. So yeah, if there's already some prior art for like testing there, that would be great.
Is our current one testing the schema, or is it testing that duffel and the charts, duffel and the bundles stay in parity?
No, it's testing that duffel can install the bundles in that repo. But I think we can add, because that is the infrastructure is already in place to add a schema validation as well.
Yeah, it's just another step on the.
sounding more and more like the kind of thing where we change one thing and we spend the next 4 days finding and fixing bugs in all our stuff, which is a great situation to have. Just nobody guessed this is going to take 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think in the short term, them being broken, I think is fine because it's a small group of people. But if we've got the infrastructure to fix them once and then go like, well, these never break again, like because the spec has stabilized a little bit, then that feels like more. It feels more sustainable. If it's like, otherwise changes to the spec become really expensive, and we'll like because it's like, oh, I have to fix all the examples versus break the spec a lot of times quickly and then like collectively fix all the examples.
Yeah, it is worth saying out loud too that the part of the reason we're trying to do these meetings and move the spec at the speed we are while still getting a lot of people from the community involved is because we know that there's a huge amount of expertise in this domain, and CNAB's a pretty ambitious project to begin with. I know it's annoying to some people that they're hearing the spec's going to change a lot in the next few weeks, and the first thing you hear is, great, well, why bother work on anything, right? But the reason why we're trying to do this kind of thing now is because we feel like, I think Gareth articulated it really well before, right? There's kind of like this small window of time where a spec can be truly liquid before you have to solidify it into something that's going to be inflexible. And if we make a wrong guess or some bad assumptions this early, we might end up accidentally foreclosing on opportunities that CNAB is supposed to be able to accomplish. So I know it's a little frustrating for some people that the spec has been changing as frequently, but to reiterate what Gareth already said, I think it's really important that if you can get involved at this point and give us feedback or contribute or become a maintainer, it's going to help the spec as a whole and consequently save time and energy over the next few years if the spec works as it's intended, right?
Yeah, I think the alternative is basically a spec that stabilizes really quickly, and yes, we can build tools against stable spec, but it actually turns out to be horrible. Or you come up with basically just hypothetical, like no one's tested, like the spec gets tested by tool builders, and we've like the Python client I'm writing was mainly about like going through testing the spec, and I found a lot of little issues, and Matt's been fixing them. So.
Just looking at the CNAB channel, we had a couple of things that were posted by my team, but still I think they may be worth discussing now briefly. The one, Matt, is should claims be part of the spec or not?
Ooh.
They were posted today, so I mean it's perfectly reasonable to say we need to just think about them and then come back to it.
Yeah. Again, I feel like the big question is how modular do we want to make this spec? The intention of the claim system is the system for storing information about your releases. It's currently in the spec and gives a JSON format and is marked as optional, I think. Our intention of putting this in there is largely to help systems where they're going to create backends to store claims. So, you might assume that a big public cloud provider might, for example, want to build a claim system that leveraged one of their existing database offerings for their internal use of CNAB or something like that, while Duffel will store it locally on the file system by default and other things. I wouldn't mind moving it out into a separate, if we end up going with that componentized thing, I wouldn't mind moving that out into a separate one because it's not actually designed to solve the problem for everybody. It was designed to provide a specification for the people who wanted to be able to swap in and out client-side implementations, but still maintain state between different client implementations or different service implementations or things like that.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me.
Again, we could, I don't know, over the next week or so between the next meetings, if anybody has thoughts about this idea of breaking the spec out into multiple smaller specs and having the core just be a description of what the CNAB bundle looks like, and then one for registries, one for claims. We probably would put some of the signing and verification stuff in another one in that case. If people think, if that idea resonates more with people than one big long spec with several parts that are marked as optional, weigh in on that in the issue queue. Or Carolyn.
Well, I just have a question. If you say that it's a tools problem and you don't put it in the spec, you lose the ability to switch between tools, between an install and an update. Do we care as a group?
Yeah, that was going to be, I think, my reply to the claims thing. I think it is, interoperability is useful as a general high level answer that leads to an answer maybe.
Yeah, I don't think the spec should have any detail of implementation on where the spec should, or on where the claim should be stored, but the structure of the spec and the schema for the spec should allow interoperability between different tools.
As well, like if we end up in a position where that conversation can we can get to a point like within the working draft process, we can go like, look, if this bit's really stable and this bit's like actually might need more adding to it to make it to realize those goals, then like we can always have that outside to start with and basically then add things, because adding things that are net new is reasonably straightforward. By adding things that change things that are already there, like a lot harder.
Yep. Jeremy pointed out that there are also, he pointed to one case where people have asked for extensions on the claims to allow some additional state storage. And I'm aware of another one too. So it does seem to be that there are people who are interested in the interoperability on systems based on claims. So
yeah, to give some context for that, it's not like Porter needs it or Duffel needs it. It's people who are writing bundles may not be working with systems or tooling that gives them automatic persistence. Like they don't have something that's already talking to a backend system that's storing what was installed and what are all the IDs. Like they wrote a bash script, or they're working with some tool that isn't remembering what was done during the install. And so when they get time to do an upgrade or a delete, and they're starting from scratch, and they either have to then inside their bundle manage remembering all that, and we didn't really help them out from a spec perspective at that point. And they have to build it all either into the tooling or into the bundle's logic itself. Or if they're able to rely on it being in the claim, then that kind of gives them a place to consistently store it and rely on that across whatever CNAB compatible tool they're using.
I think where this question came from, because I didn't pose it, was it because it depends on where you store them, and if we're looking at storing them not only locally, there's a transport question that comes in as well. So it's maybe not being against the having a schema for what's stored, but more on the transport side that it could be interesting.
Yeah, I mean ultimately claims doesn't give you interop without an implementation of a claim system.
Yep.
Which might be the right balance to take, but or if you want everything to be interoperable, you need an actual everyone uses the same thing. And I think if that's the future, it shouldn't be like the now, because I think it's a bunch of work, and I think we probably need to like see people build those things and see what happens. And obviously Duffel's already got its local like claim store. We've been talking about like CRDs as claim stores, and I think until things get built, then we won't know if we need more than that. But the idea that the claim, like the claim itself of this is the structure of the thing, like this is the information that you can pass between things, I think is valuable in and of itself. But yeah, that like should there be more specified? I would say maybe, but we don't know what that is yet until we've built them.
Yep. Yeah. Well, yeah. And maybe that's a good argument for breaking the spec down a little bit so that some things like the core can solidify at a different pace than other things like the claim system. Lachlan, do you want to add that as an agenda item for next week, is just deciding maybe at that point on whether we want to do one massive spec or multiple more component-oriented specs? And we'll just put that to rest next week and then.
Sure. Is there precedence for this in OCI under, have a namespace which is CNAB, and then we have, I guess there is, right? There's runtime image.
Yeah.
We could have a claims and a bundle. Okay. Yep.
Another thing I forgot to ask at the beginning was, does anybody want to do updates on some of the tooling that they're working on or anything they'd like to share about CNAB?
I'm happy to if nobody else is gonna talk, but I don't want to talk the whole meeting.
I was gonna volunteer Michelle to talk about what she's been working on this week too.
So volunteer. I'll let you go, Chris, and then I'll go.
Yeah. So we're about to land the core functionality into the Docker App Master. The slow process has been upstreaming stuff to Docker CLI and to duffel and the spec. We're trying to do this cleanly and properly, and so that's just taking time. Once we've done that, we're hoping to solidify some of the registry stuff so we can implement the push-pull, which we'll be working with Matt and his team on. And anybody else who'd like to reach out and chat to us about that, we're on the Cloud Native Slack on the CNAB channel. I think you can find a lot of us there. Yeah, that's me.
Yes, I've been working on duffel on a few different parts. So I think recently we merged the change that allows you to import and export using bundle references instead of having to pass in the path to the bundle file. And then there's some other UX cleanup that I'm working on around that, but I also jumped to refactoring the builder component of duffel. So duffel build takes duffel, like a manifest file, and builds all the invocation images that you need, and then updates the bundle file accordingly and saves it to your local store. So now we're trying to, we've separated the concept of an image builder and a bundle builder so that if some other tool is trying to build invocation images, they could reuse the logic that we're using without having to actually use our bundle builder as well. You can have your own bundle builder if you want. Yeah, that's it for now. I think after this, I'll probably focus a little bit on updating the examples and making sure docs are cleaner. And we also have a waffle board now, which I put in a pull request to update our README with the waffle status, but it basically tracks our issues and like what we're working on so that people can more transparently see what priorities are in duffel, at least, and Porter and a few other places.
Yeah, Carolyn, do you want to do an update / intro to Porter? I'm not sure everybody's familiar with it since we just launched it.
Sure.
Very end of last year.
Yeah. So the idea behind Porter is obviously everyone loves YAML and wants more YAML. No, the idea is that we want a more declarative experience for authoring bundles and to give people a way to compose bundles and be able to make kind of repetitive domain-specific logic. Like if I want to be able to automate certain parts of, say, interacting with a cloud provider, interacting with Helm, and interacting with Terraform, things like that, instead of having to write a bash that talks to the CLIs and things like that, and then has to kind of handle passing around environment variables and extracting things out of these tools and parsing JSON and then kind of bringing it all together. Yes, sorry, Radu. I did that just to annoy you. Instead, what it lets you do is describe everything you want your bundle to be able to do and identify concrete steps and the inputs and outputs to those steps, which could be parameters and credentials to the bundle, or could be information that was created in a previous step within the bundle. Maybe one of the steps was to create a MySQL database inside of Azure, which made a bunch of different credentials themselves, to be able to pipe those credentials into the next step and do something with it. And then be able to do that all just inside that YAML without having to break into different toolings and write a lot of glue. Porter basically handles all the glue work and then also lets the community contribute what we're calling the mixins to be able to interact with all these existing tools, like I said, Terraform and GKE, etc., all that AWS fun stuff, to be able to then let authors just focus on the domain-specific stuff. The other piece Porter lets you do is there's a gap in the spec, which has always annoyed me, which is the lack of dependencies between bundles. I don't want to rewrite over and over again how to install a database and configure it properly and then pass that on to WordPress is my example over and over again. So what I'd like to be able to do with Porter is be able to say, I want to be able to reference another Porter bundle and then be able to, when I build the bundle, it'll bring in my dependencies and compile it all in and make one invocation image. But as far as the author is concerned, they maybe had a chain and a nested level like hierarchy of dependencies, and we're able to just focus on their one application and people able to author distinct little bundles that people can reuse and then build on top of. So, magic.
not ambitious at all.
No,
because
totally
when you
not.
start with YAML, everything is easy.
Yeah, every single conference you're going to see you're meeting at for the rest of the year is going to be talking about Porter.
Oh. Adnan, do you guys have any updates?
No, nothing at the moment. I just wanted to listen into the first meeting here and see what's going on.
Okay. And I'll open it. Anybody else have anything they want to talk about for like things you've worked on or experiments you've done?
Oh, if anyone's a Python programmer, I'd happily grab some folks to have a look at the API for the PiC Lab module. It needs some updates with the recent spec changes in the last week or so. But I've got the whole like bundle like description format done, so you can parse bundles, you can write Python instead of writing like whatever you might do. So you can easily write something on top of that. I've also got an interface for like installing and upgrading bundles.
You want to demo that next week?
Yeah, sure. We could do some demos.
That'd be great.
Are you using Python, Docker Python SDK?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's an optional dependency if you want to run things. Like Python has types now. Like when did that happen? Like I don't get to program as much as I used to. Like and I come back and like Python's got a whole type system.
Sorry, did you say that your client, the PiCNAB client, also deals with installing and uninstalling bundles? I think I missed that.
So I haven't implemented all of the spec. I haven't done the claim system, for example. I've done all the mandatory bits. Caveat, some of them need updates now. Most of it focuses on parsing the bundle format and just like having classes that you can then represent in that different ways. So there's examples in the README. And yeah, then there's all the runtime bits as well are done. So yeah, I haven't done signing because it's going to change. I haven't done claims because I haven't got around to it. I haven't done, and I'm not sure there is anything to do with the invocation images. I haven't quite decided on that bit yet. And interesting things to note are like I found a few bits of issues, opened issues, where I think we've got most of them sorted out, or we've had discussions around them, mainly clarifications more than anything else. But it's relatively straightforward to write a client, which I think is a good thing, and partly because the spec is the size of the spec. So if anyone else is interested, like now, I think if you're writing a client now, it's going to change a little bit, but I think in a couple of weeks, it's probably an interesting project for anyone who might be interested in picking up a new language or interested in programming because they're not allowed to do that as their job, as product and project and program people or managers.
Hold on, I think Gareth gets to program more than I do, so I think
yeah, if you're a manager, this sounds cool. Everyone else is going like, what the hell's going on? but yeah, that, also people who come to this like later, writing clients actually is it's not a trivial exercise, but it is actually quite an interesting one, and it's not hours, but it's not like weeks. I think that's a good sign generally. And more clients would be good later. Yeah, happy to do some demos next time.
Excellent.
Oh, and I'm doing a talk in Belgium on CNAB at Config Management Camp on like Monday or Tuesday. I can't remember.
I think there a lot of people are saying they've proposed conference topics on CNAB, so this will be interesting to see. I'll be out in Virginia next week. Jeremy and I will be doing some at the Microsoft Ignite DC event too, so we're pretty excited about that. I'm excited about that. Are you excited, Jeremy? Okay.
As long as it's not Snowmageddon, it'll be good.
Yeah. Is our day of the talk? Our talk is the opening act for the State of the Union, right? I think it's on the same day. Yeah. Okay. Well, I know we're yeah. Go ahead, Michelle.
Just one more thing. When we were, this is feeling like the early Helm days. It warms my heart. But with so many people coming together and stuff. But what we did when we were first starting Helm and people started doing conference talks, what we didn't do is we didn't put all of our resources for presentations in the same place. So something maybe we could think about doing as we start doing these conference talks is just putting diagrams and stuff in one place, and maybe under the Deus Labs org or some place so that people can reuse it. I wish we had done that earlier for Helm.
Well, for want of a discussion about what the place should be, is there a repo in the Deus Labs org that makes sense now? If the answer is no, we should create one, and if the answer is yes, we should put them there, and we'll just start. Even if we move that one place, I think the important thing is having one place. That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, let's create a community repo. Isn't that what most of the projects do for things like this?
Yeah. I don't know actually. I haven't seen a lot of people do this, but yeah, CNCF does that.
Do it. I think a bunch of these things there's so few of us, we can probably make quick decisions.
Yeah, I'll volunteer.
Oh,
I think Carolyn already volunteered.
I'll seed it with pictures.
Please.
Oh. Yep.
You know what picture I'm gonna put into it?
Oh my God, the Porter one. The Porter one.
Yeah.
On second thought, maybe I should revoke the offer to let. Which Porter one is that?
The Porter logo, the one that does this.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I use this
little emoji.
I was just imagining opening the repo and having animated cat gifs everywhere. So, cats jumping, cats that are bad at jumping. Is that the?
No, I'm way classier than that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, apparently, I'm reading my own personality into other people's.
Yeah, create a repo and yeah, anything we do, I'll come across. I know a bunch of the Docker captains have been chatting about some things that will push people towards submitting PRs there. It sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, and I think I have a PowerPoint template that has that same style that we used for the DockerCon demo, the real CNAB style. I have to have Ronan double check it because my sensibilities when it comes to style are bad, but his are very, very good. But then I can load that up too, and that'll give people a nice template.
And people will be like, "Oh, that Matt is all Microsoft technologies. It's a PowerPoint template." What?
I know. As soon as you saw me stammer when I started to say it, I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that's
I like
great.
PowerPoint. There are things I don't like, but PowerPoint is a technology I would be willing to defend. But anyway, that's for a different meeting. It is about time, so I'll wrap this one up before I dig myself further into this obviously recorded call. Thanks again, Gareth and Lachie, both for getting all this stuff together to get this meeting on the calendar. I'm looking forward to doing these weekly because I think it'll really help us move through this kind of growing pains period a little bit more rapidly. Any other housekeeping we need to do? We're on every week or every other week?
Currently every week. Is that okay?
We might as well try it for that. We might shorten it to we might try and shorten it to a half hour if we're going to do it every week, particularly for those of you in Europe who are either missing dinner or or up late or but yeah.
This is kind compared to the OCI meeting.
I know. I saw that one. I'm like, that's 8 at 1, 2, 3. Oh boy, that's going to be a late
or
one.
afternoon stand-ups for that matter.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Okay, so we'll keep it at weekly and change it to half an hour.
Okay.
Thanks all.
11:30 p.m. Oh man. Okay, you win. Oh, all right.
Off to all our next calls. Yeah, good to chat with everyone. Like, we'll catch up soon.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.